Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive, into Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yes, a classic.
Yeah, we're going to uncover those core principles and kind of see how they can apply to your life, whether you're leading a team, building a business, or just trying to level up your day-to-day.
Absolutely. And, if you want to explore the book in more detail after this deep dive, you can find a link in the description or a pinned comment.
Awesome. So what always strikes you about Covey's work?
It's not about the surface level life hacks, right? It goes way deeper than that.
Yeah.
Exploring those fundamental character traits and, as he calls them, paradigms that truly drive lasting effectiveness.
Okay, paradigms. He uses that word a lot.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of fancy, but what's he really getting at there, and why should we care?
Well, think of a paradigm as like the mental lens through which you see the world. It's like your map of reality shaping how you interpret everything around you. So Covey's point is that if your map is outdated or just plain wrong, you're going to struggle to reach your destination no matter how hard you try.
So it's like using a map from the 1800s to navigate a modern city.
Exactly.
You might end up in the wrong place even with the best intentions.
Yeah.
Got it. But how do our paradigms actually play out in real life?
Covey uses this great analogy of a ship captain navigating through thick fog.
Okay.
And he thinks he's on course, but he's actually headed straight for a lighthouse because his visibility is so limited. Similarly, many of us are trying to solve problems using the wrong mental maps, leading to, frustration and ineffective results.
Yeah, it's like trying to fix a leaky faucet with a hammer.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the tool's not wrong, it's just the wrong tool for the job.
The wrong tool for the job, for sure.
Okay, I'm starting to see the light, so to speak. So how do we update our mental maps and become more effective, according to Covey?
That's where the 7 habits come in.
Yeah.
But before we dive into those, we need to grasp Covey's central argument, which is this shift from what he calls the personality ethic to the character ethic.
Okay.
He spent years studying what truly makes people successful and discovered that lasting effectiveness isn't about, superficial techniques,
Right.
but about those deeper principles of character.
Yeah.
It's not about charming your way to the top,
Yeah.
but about building a foundation of integrity, honesty, and fairness.
Right. Because you can have all the charm in the world, but if you're not trustworthy or reliable,
Exactly.
you're not going to build lasting success.
You got it.
Speaking of character, I remember Covey telling this story about his own struggles with his son who was having trouble in school.
Yes. This anecdote really highlights the limitations of the personality ethic.
Right.
He and his wife tried everything to help their son, positive affirmations, rewards, punishments, but nothing seemed to work.
Wow.
They were so focused on changing his behavior that they missed the deeper issue,
Which was
her own perception of their son as inadequate. Covey writes, and this is a key quote, "The way we see the problem, is the problem." They were trying to change his behavior through the lens of their own flawed paradigm.
So they were essentially handing their son the wrong map.
Exactly.
And then wondering why he kept getting lost.
Yeah.
That's a tough realization.
It is. Covey realized that his attempts to change his son's behavior were actually reinforcing the very paradigm that was holding him back.
Wow.
He had to shift his own perception first.
That's a powerful insight. So it's not just about changing our actions, but also changing the way we see ourselves and the world around us. That's a pretty big ask.
It is, but it's also incredibly empowering.
Yeah.
Covey argues that we need to build our lives on a foundation of timeless principles like honesty, integrity, fairness, service, that he calls the principle-centered paradigm.
Okay.
It's like building your house on solid rock instead of shifting sand.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So how do we start shifting our paradigms and becoming more principle-centered?
Well, that's where the first habit comes in. Be proactive. Covey introduces this idea of the circle of concern and the circle of influence to help us understand how to focus our energy for maximum impact.
Okay, let's break those down. What exactly are the circle of concern and circle of influence, and how do they relate to proactivity?
So think of your circle of concern as everything that worries or concerns you.
Okay.
Things like the weather, politics, other people's choices. These are often things outside your direct control, and dwelling on them leads to frustration and a sense of helplessness.
Right.
Your circle of influence, on the other hand, is about those things you can actually impact through your own choices and actions.
So reactive people spin their wheels worrying about things in their circle of concern,
Yeah,
while proactive people focus their energy on what they can actually influence.
exactly.
That seems pretty straightforward. But how do we actually put this into practice when we're faced with real life challenges. I mean, it's easy to say be proactive, but what does that actually look like in the thick of things?
Covey uses the powerful story of Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Nazi death camps.
Wow.
Even in those horrific circumstances, Frankl realized he still had the power to choose his response.
Wow.
He couldn't control what was happening to him, but he could control his attitude and how he chose to interpret his experience.
Yeah.
That's the essence of proactivity.
That's an incredible example of choosing your response in the face of truly unimaginable circumstances. It's a powerful reminder that we always have some degree of choice, even when it feels like we don't. But how do we cultivate that kind of mental fortitude in everyday life?
Covey suggests that we start by becoming aware of our language.
Okay.
Reactive people often use phrases like, "there's nothing I can do," or "that's just the way I am."
Right.
Proactive people, however, use language that reflects their ability to choose, such as, "let's look at our alternatives," or "I choose to respond this way."
So it's about shifting from a language of victimhood to a language of empowerment.
Exactly.
I like that.
And it's not just about words, it's about taking action. Covey also suggests making and keeping small commitments to yourself. This could be as simple as waking up 15 minutes earlier each day, sticking to an exercise routine, or being more intentional in your interactions with others.
Yeah.
These small acts of self-discipline help you build that proactivity muscle and gradually expand your circle of influence.
So starting small, building those little wins, and gradually expanding our capacity to choose our response, that's a much more manageable approach than trying to overhaul our entire personality overnight.
Absolutely. And remember, you don't have to figure this all out on your own.
Right.
You can always go deeper with the book itself, which you can find a link to in the description or pinned comment.
Great reminder. So we've laid the groundwork for becoming more proactive. In part 2, we'll explore habit 2, begin with the end in mind, and see how it connects to that foundation of proactivity we've established. Stay with us.
Looking forward to it. Welcome back.
All right, so we've talked about being proactive.
Yes.
Getting ourselves in the right mindset.
Right.
So what's next?
So let's shift gears now and explore habit 2. Begin with the end in mind.
Okay.
This habit is all about vision, purpose, and direction.
Okay.
Covey argues that everything is created twice, first mentally, then physically.
So like building a house. You wouldn't start hammering nails without a blueprint.
Exactly.
You'd first create a detailed plan envisioning every room and feature before you ever break ground.
Precisely. And Covey uses a rather powerful, if a bit morbid analogy to drive this point home.
Okay.
Imagine attending your own funeral.
Whoa, okay.
And listening to the eulogies.
Okay.
What would you want people to say about you?
Yeah.
What kind of legacy would you like to leave behind?
Wow, that's a heavy image.
It is.
But I get it. It's not about dwelling on death, but about using this visualization to clarify what truly matters most to us. It's like stepping outside the daily grind and asking, what's the point of all this? What do I want my life to stand for?
Exactly. Covey emphasizes that many of us are living out scripts handed to us by others, parents, society, or culture, without ever consciously choosing our own direction.
Yeah.
It's as if we're climbing the ladder of success but haven't stopped to ask if it's leaning against the right wall.
That really resonates with me. I think a lot of us get caught up in the busyness of life without really pausing to consider if we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
So how do we break free from those pre-written scripts and start writing our own stories?
Covey encourages us to create a personal mission statement, which he calls our personal constitution.
Okay.
It's a document that outlines our core values, our aspirations, and the guiding principles by which we want to live our lives.
Right.
It's like having a compass to navigate the complexities of life and make decisions align with our deepest values.
So a personal mission statement is kind of like a North Star, guiding our choices and keeping us on track even when things get chaotic.
Exactly. It's a powerful tool for self-leadership, enabling us to become the authors of our own lives rather than simply reacting to external circumstances.
Okay, I'm sold. A personal mission statement sounds like a game changer. But where do we even start with something like that? Covey talks about identifying our center. What does that mean exactly?
Our center is the source from which we derive our security guidance, wisdom, and power.
Okay.
It's what we base our decisions and our sense of self-worth on. Covey warns against alternative centers that are ultimately unstable and lead to a reactive life.
Okay.
He talks about common centers like spouse-centeredness, family-centeredness, money-centeredness, work-centeredness, and even possession-centeredness.
So those alternative centers are like building our house on shaky ground.
Right.
They might seem stable for a while, but they're ultimately vulnerable to external forces.
Right. For example, someone who is spouse-centered might feel completely lost if their relationship ends.
Right.
A person who is money-centered might experience intense anxiety during times of financial instability.
Yeah.
These centers are external and therefore beyond our control.
Yeah. It's like putting all your eggs in one basket and hoping that basket never tips over. Not a great strategy for long-term stability and happiness.
Yeah.
So what's the alternative? What does a stable, principle-centered life look like?
Covey proposes a principle-centered paradigm as the most stable and effective center.
Okay.
This means aligning our lives with timeless principles like integrity, fairness, service, and excellence.
Okay.
These principles are like bedrock, unchanging, and unwavering.
Right.
When we build our lives on this foundation, we gain a sense of inner security and direction that empowers us to navigate the inevitable challenges of life.
So it's about moving from an externally driven life to an internally guided one based on those timeless principles. That makes a lot of sense. But how does this principle-centered paradigm actually play out in our day-to-day lives?
Yeah.
How do we go from big picture principles to concrete actions?
That's where habit 3, put first things first, comes in.
Okay.
This habit is about time management and prioritization, but not in the traditional sense.
Right.
Covey's not talking about just getting more done in less time, but about aligning our daily actions with our deepest values and goals as outlined in our personal mission statement.
Okay, I'm intrigued because I think we've all been bombarded with those time management tips that promise to squeeze more productivity out of our already packed schedules.
Yeah.
But Covey seems to be offering a different perspective. So how does he approach time management? What's his secret sauce?
Well, he introduces a tool he calls the time management matrix,
Yeah.
which categorizes activities into 4 quadrants.
Okay.
Quadrant 1 is urgent and important. Quadrant 2 is not urgent but important. Quadrant 3 is urgent but not important. And Quadrant 4 is not urgent and not important.
Okay, I'm visualizing this matrix in my mind. So quadrant 1 is like those firefighting tasks that demand our immediate attention, right?
Yeah.
Those deadlines, crises, and urgent problems that we have to deal with right now. And quadrant 4 is probably where those time-wasting activities live, mindless, scrolling, binge-watching shows.
Yeah.
We don't even enjoy basically the stuff that just drains our energy without adding any real value to our lives.
Exactly. Most of us spend the majority of our time in quadrants 1 and 3, constantly putting out fires and reacting to urgent demands.
Yeah.
But Covey says the key to effectiveness is focusing on quadrant 2, those not urgent but important activities.
Quadrant 2. Those are the things we know we should be doing.
Yeah.
But they often get pushed aside because they're not screaming for our immediate attention. Things like planning a relationship, building personal development, and preventative maintenance. Those things that contribute to our long-term goals, our mission, and our overall well-being. But they're so easy to neglect because they don't have that urgent label attached to them.
Exactly. He uses a powerful analogy of the goose and the golden egg to illustrate this.
Okay.
We can't just focus on getting golden eggs results without taking care of the goose, our production capability.
Yeah.
Quadrant 2 activities are all about nurturing the goose, building our capacity to create those golden eggs in the long run.
So it's about playing the long game, investing in ourselves, our relationships, and those activities that build a solid foundation for long-term success and fulfillment. But how do we actually make that shift? How do we break free from the tyranny of the urgent and start prioritizing those quadrant 2 activities?
Covey challenges us to become what he calls quadrant 2 managers of our lives, scheduling our priorities rather than prioritizing our schedule.
Right.
This requires proactivity and discipline, but the rewards are immense.
Yeah.
He suggests several practical strategies.
Okay.
First, we need to clearly identify our roles and goals based on our personal mission statement.
Okay.
Then we need to plan our week, not just our day, giving ourselves sufficient time for those quadrant 2 activities.
So it's about being proactive and intentional with our time, carving out space for those important but not urgent activities. I like that. It's about being the architect of our own lives, rather than letting our schedules dictate our priorities. But what about those times when things inevitably get crazy and those urgent demands start piling up? How do we stay focused on quadrant 2 when we're feeling overwhelmed?
Covey emphasizes the importance of delegation, calling it stewardship delegation.
Oh.
It's about empowering others to contribute their talents and abilities while aligning their efforts with the overall mission.
Right.
This frees up our time to focus on those quadrant 2 activities that only we can do.
Delegation. That's a crucial skill for anyone who wants to level up their effectiveness. It's about letting go of the need to control everything and trusting others to contribute their unique skills and perspectives. It's about building a team, a community, a support system that allows us to achieve more than we ever could on our own. But realistically, delegation can be tough. How do we delegate effectively without micromanaging or feeling like we're losing control?
He provides practical tips for implementing these principles, including using a weekly planner that incorporates our roles, goals, and scheduled priorities. And he reminds us that flexibility is key. There will always be unexpected events and urgent demands. The key is not to let them derail our quadrant 2 focus entirely. It's about finding that balance between responding to the urgent and staying true to our priorities.
This is so helpful. It's not about achieving some mythical state of perfect balance, but about constantly recalibrating, adjusting, and finding that sweet spot where we're making progress on our goals while also being responsive to the demands of life.
Exactly. And remember, you can always dive deeper into these concepts and find even more practical guidance in the full book, which, as a reminder, you can find a link to in the description or pinned comment.
Perfect. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've explored the importance of starting with the end in mind, defining our personal mission statement, identifying our center, and mastering the art of time management through the lens of the time management matrix. But there's still so much more to explore in the 7 habits. In part 3, we'll delve into the heart of Covey's philosophy, the principles of interdependence, which are embodied in habits 4, 5, and 6. We'll see how to build effective relationships and create synergistic outcomes through win-win thinking, empathetic communication, and creative cooperation.
Stay tuned. This is where the real magic of the 7 habits unfolds.
Okay, so we've explored being proactive and beginning with the end in mind. Really setting that foundation for personal effectiveness.
Right, those private victories that are so essential for lasting change.
Exactly. But, we don't live in a vacuum, right?
Of course not. We're social creatures by nature.
Yeah. So how do we take those personal victories and apply them to our interactions with others?
Well, that's where the next 3 habits come in, habits 4, 5, and 6.
Okay, the habits of interdependence.
Exactly. These habits shift the focus from self-mastery to creating synergistic outcomes in our interactions with others.
And I think it's important to highlight, that Covey emphasizes that true interdependence can only be achieved when we have that solid foundation of independence.
Absolutely. It's like, you can't effectively build relationships with others if we don't first have a strong sense of self-awareness, purpose, and self-control.
It's like trying to build a house on a foundation of sand.
Exactly.
It's just not going to stand up to the storms of life.
Yeah.
We need to build that solid inner foundation first before we can create, strong and lasting connections with others.
He uses this great analogy of an emotional bank account to illustrate this principle.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Every interaction we have with someone either makes a deposit or a withdrawal.
Yeah.
Trust is the currency in this account.
Okay, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So if we're constantly, criticizing, judging, or breaking promises, we're making withdrawals from that emotional bank account, depleting that trust.
Yeah.
But when we're kind, respectful, and, follow through on our commitments, we're making deposits, building that trust and strengthening the relationship.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And habits 4, 5, and 6 are all about making those deposits, building trust, and creating an environment where synergistic collaboration can flourish.
All right, so let's unpack these habits one by one, starting with habit 4. Think win-win. What does this look like in practice? Because I think a lot of people misunderstand this concept, thinking it's about compromise or settling for the middle ground.
You're absolutely right. It's not about compromise. Win-win isn't about splitting the difference or sacrificing your own needs to please someone else.
Right.
It's about finding solutions that benefit everyone involved.
Yeah.
Covey challenges us to shift our paradigm from scarcity to abundance, believing that there's enough for everyone to succeed.
Okay.
It's not a zero-sum game where one person's gain is another person's loss.
So it's about expanding the pie rather than fighting over crumbs.
Games.
That's a much more empowering and collaborative approach. But how do we actually cultivate that win-win mindset? Especially when we're faced with situations where our interests, seem to conflict with someone else's.
He contrasts win-win with other approaches like win-lose. I get what I want at your expense. Lose-win. I give in to keep the peace. Or lose-lose. We both end up worse off.
Yeah, those other approaches might seem like the easier option in the moment.
Right.
But they ultimately erode trust and create resentment.
Exactly. He argues that win-win is the only truly sustainable approach in interdependent situations.
Yeah.
Whether it's in our personal relationships at work or in negotiations,
Right.
It requires shifting our focus from me versus you to we.
He uses that example of a company president who was frustrated by the lack of cooperation among his employees.
Yes.
And the president realized that he was trying to get the fruits of cooperation from a paradigm of competition.
Oh, yeah.
His win-lose approach had created a culture of low trust, which was sabotaging his efforts to build a collaborative team.
Exactly. That's why Covey stresses that win-win requires those three key elements: integrity, maturity, and an abundance mentality.
Okay, break those down for us.
So integrity means aligning our actions with our values.
Okay.
Maturity is about balancing courage and consideration.
Okay.
And an abundance mentality is that belief that there's enough for everyone to succeed.
Those are powerful principles. It's not just about negotiating a deal. It's about approaching every interaction with a spirit of fairness, openness, and a genuine desire to find solutions that benefit everyone.
Absolutely. He also highlights the importance of establishing clear expectations and agreements, using the example of his own son and the green and clean yard.
Yeah.
By defining desired results, guidelines, resources, accountability, and consequences up front.
Okay.
Both parties feel empowered and aligned.
It's about setting clear boundaries and expectations from the start.
Yes.
To avoid misunderstandings and resentment down the line.
It's about moving from go for delegation, go for this, go for that and tell me when it's done, to stewardship delegation, which empowers others to contribute their best while staying focused on the desired outcomes.
That's a fantastic way to frame delegation. It's not about bossing people around, but about empowering them to take ownership and contribute their unique talents and perspectives. It's about creating a win-win for everyone.
And that leads us seamlessly into habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Ah, yes, one of my favorites.
This habit is all about empathy.
Yes.
Really listening to and understanding another person's perspective before trying to make your own point.
This one is so important. It's about putting aside our own agendas and truly listening with the intent to understand, not just to reply. It's about stepping into the other person's shoes and seeing the world through their eyes.
Right.
But let's be honest, this is harder than it sounds.
It is.
We all have our own filters, biases, and assumptions that can cloud our perception.
Covey says that most of us listen with the intent to reply, filtering everything through our own paradigms. We're so busy preparing our response that we don't truly hear what the other person is saying.
It's like we're having two separate conversations.
Exactly.
Instead of one shared dialogue.
Yeah.
We're talking at each other rather than with each other.
He uses the analogy of an optometrist who tries to fix your vision by giving you their own glasses.
Oh, yeah.
It just doesn't work.
Right. Everyone's vision is unique, and we can't just slap on someone else's perspective and expect it to fit. We need to take the time to understand their unique viewpoint.
Exactly. He introduces the concept of empathic listening.
Yes.
Which goes beyond just hearing words. It's about listening with the intent to understand both the content and the feeling behind the other person's communication.
So it's not just about comprehending the words, but about tuning into the emotions.
Yes.
The unspoken needs and the underlying message. It's about listening with our hearts as well as our heads.
He describes 5 levels of listening: ignoring, pretending, selective listening, attentive listening, and that highest level, empathic listening.
And I'm guessing most of us hover somewhere between pretending and selective listening most of the time.
Probably. But empathic listening is like giving someone psychological air. When we feel truly heard and understood, it creates a sense of safety and trust that allows for more open and authentic communication.
It's like we're saying, I see you, I hear you, I value your perspective, and that creates a foundation for connection and collaboration.
Covey shares that great example of a salesman who was about to lose a major deal.
Okay.
And he realized that he had been so focused on his own pitch that he hadn't taken the time to understand his client's needs.
Yeah.
By shifting his approach and genuinely seeking to understand, he was able to salvage the deal and build a stronger relationship with his client.
That's a perfect example of how empathic listening can transform a situation. It's not just about closing a deal. It's about building relationships, creating win-win solutions, and fostering a sense of mutual respect.
And that brings us to habit 6, synergize.
All right, synergy, one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around a lot. So what's Covey's take on synergy?
This habit is all about creative cooperation, valuing differences, and achieving outcomes that are greater than the sum of their parts.
So it's about moving beyond just tolerating differences to actually celebrating them. So recognizing the diversity of thought, perspective, and experience can lead to truly innovative and groundbreaking solutions.
He uses the analogy of a football team.
Okay.
Each player has unique strengths and weaknesses.
Right.
But when they work together, leveraging their individual abilities and perspectives,
Yeah.
they can accomplish something far beyond what any individual could achieve alone.
It's about harnessing the power of the collective, tapping into that shared intelligence and creativity that emerges when people feel safe to contribute their unique gifts and talents.
He shares a great example of a class he was teaching where he initially had a structured plan.
Okay.
But as the students began to share their experiences and insights, the group energy shifted.
Yeah.
They started to co-create something entirely new and more powerful than Covey had originally envisioned.
That's the magic of synergy. When we create a space for open and honest dialogue, for respectful disagreement, and for a genuine willingness to learn from each other, amazing things can happen.
He tells another story about a group of executives who were struggling to make progress on a key company challenge.
Okay.
They were stuck in a pattern of presenting their individual viewpoints and defending their positions.
They were essentially playing tug of war with ideas instead of building something together.
Exactly. By introducing the principles of win-win thinking and empathic listening, the group dynamic transformed. They were able to move beyond their individual agendas and tap into a collective creativity that led to a breakthrough solution.
That's so powerful. It's a reminder that synergy doesn't just happen by chance. It requires a conscious effort to create a culture of trust, respect, and open communication.
Covey emphasizes that synergy is not about compromise or conformity. It's about valuing the differences, respecting each other's perspectives, and building on each other's strengths to create something truly innovative and impactful.
It's about recognizing that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And that brings us to the final habit. Habit 7, sharpen the saw. This habit is all about continuous renewal in those 4 key dimensions: physical, spiritual, mental, and social-emotional.
It's about taking care of our most valuable asset, ourselves, so we can continue to grow and contribute at our highest level.
It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. We need to replenish our own energy, our resources, and our inspiration if we want to continue showing up fully in all areas of our lives.
Covey uses the analogy of a lumberjack who's trying to cut down a tree with a dull saw.
Okay.
It takes much more effort and yields inferior results.
Yeah.
Sharpening the saw is about taking the time to renew ourselves so we can be more effective in all areas of life.
It's about investing in our own well-being, recognizing that self-care isn't selfish. It's essential. It's about prioritizing those activities that nourish our mind, body, and spirit so we can show up as our best selves. But realistically, it's so easy to let self-care slide, especially when we're busy and overwhelmed. How do we actually make sharpening the saw a priority in our already packed lives?
He emphasizes that each of the 4 dimensions is interconnected.
Okay.
For example, physical exercise not only benefits our body, but it also sharpens our mind and improves our emotional well-being.
So it's about finding those activities that create a ripple effect of positive benefits across all dimensions of our lives.
He shares a funny anecdote about a strenuous weightlifting session where he was convinced his friend was about to have a heart attack.
Oh my goodness.
His friend explained that the real benefit of the exercise comes at the very end when the muscle fibers rupture and the nerve fibers register the pain.
Ouch.
This triggers the body to rebuild the fibers stronger than before.
That's a great metaphor for the principle of renewal. Growth and improvement often involve pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zone, embracing discomfort, and trusting in our capacity to bounce back even stronger. It's about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, knowing that those challenges are opportunities for growth.
So what are some practical ways we can sharpen the saw in each of these dimensions?
Well, in the physical dimension, it's about regular exercise, healthy eating, and getting enough sleep.
Right.
In the spiritual dimension, it's about connecting with our core values, finding meaning and purpose in life, and engaging in practices that nurture our spirit, whether it's meditation, prayer, spending time in nature, or acts of service. In the mental dimension, it's about expanding our knowledge through reading, learning, and engaging in mentally stimulating activities. And in the social-emotional dimension, it's about building and nurturing meaningful relationships, practicing empathy, and seeking out opportunities for synergistic collaboration.
Covey emphasizes that habit 7 is the foundation for all the other habits. When we take the time to renew ourselves in each of these dimensions, we increase our capacity to live a principle-centered, effective, and fulfilling life. And remember, if you want to go even deeper into these concepts and explore Covey's insights in more detail, you can always check out the full book. You'll find a link in the description or pinned comment.
That's such an important reminder. It's about approaching personal growth as a lifelong journey, a continuous process of learning, evolving, and expanding our capacity to live a life that's aligned with our values and purpose.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the 7 habits, remember that Covey argues that lasting effectiveness is built on character, not just techniques. We have the power to choose our response to any situation, and true success comes from seeking those win-win solutions in all our interactions.
He challenges us to achieve what he calls the private victory before the public victory. It's a reminder that lasting change starts from within. So as you reflect on what we've discussed, ask yourself, what's one small private victory you could achieve this week that would move you closer to living the 7 habits? It could be committing to 15 minutes of daily meditation, having an honest conversation with a loved one, or simply choosing to respond with patience instead of reactivity in a challenging situation. Remember, small steps taken consistently can lead to remarkable transformations.
And remember, the journey of personal growth is ongoing. It's about embracing those challenges, learning from our mistakes, and celebrating those small victories along the way. The 7 habits are not a destination, but a compass guiding us towards a life of greater meaning, purpose, and effectiveness.